more three-headed frogs, more kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes. Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I am here with my co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, and together, Rebecca and I are going to craft an hour of unforgettable radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about it in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your families and your pets, and the critters that you see as you're driving along every day. And this is our special Superbowl edition of For a Green Future. Since this is an ESPN channel, we'd like to do some sports tie-ins whenever possible. And we got a great show lined up for you today. First of all, we're going to, during our little intro section here, and anyone can call in at any time during the show. Call in at 877-909-1007. And so we're going to just chat for a little bit here. In the beginning part, we're going to look at Los Angeles and Cincinnati in terms of sustainability, like which of these Super Bowl teams comes from the most sustainable city. And then we have a guest, a recorded interview with Dr. Judah Cohen, who is at MIT, and he's going to explain to us how global warming is leading to harsher winters for us here in the United States. And it's a pretty fascinating story. I mean, you must notice that the winters are actually getting shorter. They don't start till like January, and they're already, we're already seeing signs winter's coming to an end here in February. But during the winter part of winter, when it's actually snowy, it's like the temperatures are really harsh, and he's going to explain all that. Then we hear from our wonderful advertisers and patrons, and then we have a second guest calling in. Pat Marida is going to be calling in about some developments in the Ohio legislature, unfortunately related to nukes. So she's going to be talking to us about an unfortunate development there. And then Rebecca will be talking to us about an interesting subject. What have you got for us this week, Rebecca?
Things that both look and quack like ducks. And are in fact ducks.
Okay, so looking like a duck, sounding like a duck, actually being ducks. Okay. Then Ecological news, and I'm saving a story for the last story for Ecological news, which is a really terrific, upbeat, wonderful victory that we can all just be very happy and celebrate. And so we're going to end on a high note here with our special Super Bowl Sunday edition of For a Green Future. So let's get right to it. Oh, and I wanted to announce that on where we have our podcast on podomatic.com, every week they send me a little report saying where we are in their rankings in terms of, numbers of people accessing the podcast and so forth. And this week we made it to number 36 out of, thousands of podcasts in the news and information category. So thank you so much to our podcast listeners. And our YouTube videos are doing pretty well too. People are watching the YouTube video. And this week's YouTube video, the one I just put up, which was our last week's interview with Stephanie C., is better than most because I got some fancy new software and I actually was able to stick video clips and things in. So if you like watching the videos, they're better than ever. So right to our head-to-head competition, Los Angeles versus Cincinnati in terms of sustainability. And that you might think that LA would just blow Cincinnati away in this category, but there are some big negatives for Los Angeles. One is, of course, smog. LA has a lot of cars, and so a lot of air pollution. And another is actually, unfortunately, homelessness. Skid Row in Los Angeles, there's about 5,000 homeless people. And when you get a lot of people together just living in a city in tents or under underpasses, that can have a big effect on the local environment because of things like sanitation and trash, that they don't have people coming and picking up their trash every week. But in reality, I used a comparison that was done by a company called lawnstarter.com, which, you might think this is a lawn services company. Maybe they're not the best authority on this, but I looked at their metrics and stuff, and they did a pretty good comparison. They looked at things like mass transportation and official policies of environmental sustainability. And unfortunately, they ranked the cities that did the top 100 cities in the United States, and LA just trounces Cincinnati. It's really no contest.
Poor little Cincinnati.
Yeah, I know. You'd think, maybe, but no, sorry. Some of in the lawnstarter.com rankings, LA is ranked 23rd in the country, and Cincinnati is ranked number 64. And Ohio actually doesn't do too well as a state in those rankings. Our best city in those rankings is Columbus, which came in at number 40 out of 100. But some of the reasons that LA beats Cincinnati is that they're working right now to electrify their public transportation. They're getting rid of all their diesel buses and replacing them with electric buses. They have a goal of recycling 100% of their wastewater, and in order to become 70% water self-sufficient, which, up here next to the Great Lakes, we kind of take water for granted, but literally everywhere else in the world, having enough fresh water is a big thing. So,
fun fact, there was actually, I think in the 1800s, a little-known major disaster involving a dam in Los Angeles, where many thousands of people died in this flood. It was a dam that somebody had built with the aqueduct system to bring LA water, which it really needed to grow. Mm-hmm. And, they didn't build the dam very well. Yada, yada.
Right. So,
it's like a big historical disaster I'd never heard of.
Well, we'll have to get some more information on that. But they're working to recycle all their wastewater. They also have a goal of 100% renewable electricity. And when they say renewable, they don't mean nukes; they mean wind and sun. And they're going to be at 55% by 2025 and 100% by 2045. And if you look at their Office of Sustainability, it's happening. There's a whole bunch of projects and a whole bunch of ways people can join in, and they even stole the Green Party's Green New Deal. That they say there's an LA Green New Deal. Now, Cincinnati also has an Office of Sustainability, but if you go to their page, the main thing, the big headline on their Office of Sustainability is natural gas aggregation. Which, yeah.
But just natural gas, no.
Right. We're not supposed to be aggregating.
Ixnay on the natural gas nay.
Right. So that's kind of a sign. And then there's a lot of other things on there that sound pretty good, but like they have a solar co-op, which is great. And that's, basically they're aggregating people who want to put solar panels on their houses so that they can go to the suppliers and say, look, there's 100 of us and we all want to put solar panels on. What kind of price break can you give us at that scale? Which is a great idea. And they had a goal of getting 150 people to sign up for this in 2021, and actually 157 signed up, which sounds great, except that in a city the size of Cincinnati, 157 households is next to nothing, really. I mean, they should set that goal at like 15,000 rather than 150. So
is it like a block of Los Angeles or something?
Yeah, it's like it's just the numbers. If you set your goals too low, then you get things that sound good, but things that actually don't produce enough of a difference to make a difference. This is greenwashing essentially is when you make a lot of fuss about not doing very much. And so, all right, in the Super Bowl, I'm afraid, sorry everybody, I mean, I like Cincinnati. I'm glad Cincinnati's in there. I'm glad the Chiefs were out. But
they've lost the Green Bowl.
But yeah, I'm going to be rooting for LA, so we'll see what happens.
Which Joel is the sole referee of.
That's right. Every year we have our Green Bowl. I like that. That's a good description of it. Okay. Well, so if you disagree with me, you're welcome to call in at 877-909-1007. Or, of course, I forgot to mention that you can text anytime during the show at 419-973-5841, and we'll get you right on and read your text on the air. So now it's already time, believe it or not. Boy, time sure goes quickly when you're talking sports. But it's time for us to go to our guest, Dr. Judah Cohen from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and we're going to be talking about why are winters, even though they're getting shorter, why are they so dang cold these days? So go ahead, Josh. Let's hear that interview. Hello, and welcome to For Agreed Future. Could you please share with us your name and your title?
My name is Judah Cohen. I'm Director of Seasonal Forecasting at Atmospheric Environmental Research of Veris Business, and I also have an adjunct position in the Civil and Environmental Engineering at MIT.
Okay, well, thanks for taking the time to talk with us. The reason I contacted you was there's a very interesting study that you folks published that suggests that global warming can lead to colder winters for us here in the United States. And I thought that was a pretty timely thing to talk about since we're still having kind of a cold snap here in Ohio. Could you sort of run down how this is possible?
Yeah, so just to clarify, it's warming in the Arctic. So the Arctic is warming 2 to 3 times faster than the rest of the globe. But our argument is saying that warming in the Arctic can counterintuitively lead to cooler winter weather, more severe winter weather, so that includes both cold snaps and disruptive snowfalls across the mid-latitudes, and that includes, the United States, east of the Rockies. Now, how that Arctic changes can lead to more severe winter weather is a bit complicated, but it involves please, if anything sounds like it's getting too technical, you can pull me back, rein me in, but
okay.
The mechanism, it involves the polar vortex. So the polar vortex is certainly a phenomena that's being used more often in the media, so hopefully the public's getting more comfortable with it. And the polar vortex is an area of low pressure that sits right over the North Pole, and it has this west-east circulation involved in it. So there's a fast-flowing river or ribbon of air that flows around the polar vortex from west to east. And it's also important to remember that the polar vortex is in the stratosphere, so it's not. We live in the troposphere. The planes fly in the troposphere. All the weather occurs in the troposphere. But above that layer, the tropospheric layer, there's a stratosphere. So it's like 10 to 15 miles above the Earth's surface. And in its typical state, the polar vortex, so the low pressure is, the center of the polar vortex right over the North Pole. You have this, kind of jet of air that's circulating around it, and it confines all the cold air of the really cold air of the northern hemisphere close to the Arctic.
Okay, so
that kind of
that polar vortex, I'm assuming, given the word vortex, is like a circle that just literally normally circles the pole.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a circulation that has a very circular shape to it. So on the north side of that circulation is where the cold air is, and on the south of that circulation is milder air.
Okay.
So that circulation, that kind of jet, fast-flowing ribbon or river of air, kind of acts as a boundary or fence. So, it keeps the cold air on the north side, and on the south side it tends to be warmer. That is the typical state. It's a very stable state of the polar vortex, and it also tends to be very strong. So you can think of the polar vortex as a spinning top, and when it's in a very fast, quiet rotation, it just kind of sits there and has and it keeps all the kind of cold air close to it. Just like with the also the Winter Olympics this week. So it's like the figure skater. When the figure skater pulls the arms in close to the chest, it rotates much faster. And that's the same thing with a typical polar vortex. That all the cold air is close to it when it's spinning very fast.
So what's happening now?
So that's a typical thing. So where has Arctic change fit into this? We've shown now, in multiple papers that when the Arctic change can cause a change in the wave dynamics of the atmosphere. So the jet stream. So the jet stream is the river of air that's in the troposphere that carries with it all the weather systems. But so when you have small waves in the jet stream, it doesn't give off much energy, just like an ocean wave. The smaller the wave, less energy. As the waves get bigger in the ocean, you have more energy. Everybody, experiences that, when they're sitting, kind of standing in the surf. And same thing with the waves in the atmosphere. So when you have smaller waves, there's a less energy. As bigger waves, gives off more energy. And we're saying that the Arctic change amplifies the waves in the atmosphere, and so then these waves give off more energy. So they just don't propagate horizontally like an ocean wave, but they also propagate vertically. So that energy then moves from the troposphere into the stratosphere. Now, again, if you think of that polar vortex as a fast spinning, quiet rotation top, and then you start banging on it, like, if you had this top spinning there very nicely, and then you kind of hit it with your hand or bounce off of something, it would start to wobble, it would start to meander, it's no longer sitting in one spot, but it's kind of just moving all over the place. Same thing happens with the polar vortex. So Arctic change kind of gives the chain of events here. Arctic change leads to larger amplitude, bigger waves. Those waves give off more energy. That energy then kind of bangs more and more on the polar vortex top, and before where it had the circulation was quite fast around it from west to east, separating the warm and the cold air. Now the polar vortex is moving off from the North Pole, so it tends to move towards either Eurasia or towards North America. The circulation becomes more expansive. So it extends into more southerly latitude. So that cold air now is moving south of its normal position, and and then you get these more cold air outbreaks. And if you have colder air, you're more like places that maybe typically might see more rain start to see now more snow. And that's so that kind of, hopefully I wasn't too complicated my explanation, but that's kind of very simple 5-way, what is going on. That's the argument. Arctic change, because then I could get into more details about how that, what do I mean by Arctic change? But Arctic change leads to larger waves in the atmosphere. Bigger waves give off more energy. This energy kind of is now banging on the polar vortex. We call it disrupting the polar vortex. And that cold air that was kind of very nicely confined to the Arctic is now kind of expanding, becomes more expansive. That you have before, when the polar vortex is strong, you have only basically west to east flow of air around the polar vortex. Now you introduce more of a north-south flow of air. So air that's, let's say over Hawaii will more likely make it all the way towards Alaska. And that cold air that's over Alaska then will start moving south, towards the United States, like we had last week. I mean, it was, you had a big snowstorm in Ohio and cold temperatures. Texas was in the news again, with more cold and snow.
Right.
So that, that's typically what you see when you just see a disrupted polar vortex. And we had kind of this weakening or disruption of the polar vortex right at the end of January, and that preceded this period of cold weather and an increase in snowfall.
Huh, I see. Yeah, I mean, I'd heard the term polar vortex before, but I never really thought it was like literally over the pole. I knew it was, it must be from up north somewhere where it's supposed to be cold, but literally this circulation is supposed to be around the North Pole and not down here.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
The polar vortex typically is located you're very close to the North Pole. When it's strong, it's very close to the North Pole. The further it moves away from the North Pole, that means it's a weaker or disrupted state.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So its position is definitely a good indication of its strength.
Right. Okay. So one thing that we do talk about on this show, one sort of technical term we bring up a lot, is the positive feedback loop idea, that a lot of these effects of global warming actually generate more global warming. Does this disruption of the polar vortex fit into that pattern? Does the fact that the colder air is coming down even as the Arctic is warming, is that part of that whole cycle, or is this just sort of an effect of the global warming as opposed to both a cause and an effect?
Yeah. So I think it's better to think of it maybe as a redistribution of temperature and air and energy. It's not. I don't think in sum total it necessarily leads to an overall warmer winter or an overall colder winter. If it leads to more snow cover across the hemisphere, that can be like a negative feedback loop because snow cover reflects sunlight more effectively than any other naturally occurring surface. So if you get a disruption of the polar vortex and now the snow cover is much more extensive across the northern hemisphere, that could kind of be counteracting global warming. But it's very short term, and it's not. I think overall, in this longer term scheme of things, doesn't have too much of a substantive effect.
Right.
But yeah, I like to. In my own mind, I think of it more kind of a redistribution, not kind of additive or subtractive to the overall global warming picture. Because what happens is that when you get a disrupted polar vortex, and as we show, this is happening more and more often. You mix air masses more. So warm air is being, that's typically, again, like in lower latitudes, gets transported into the Arctic. And then cold air is typically over the Arctic gets transported further south. So typically when you have a disruption of the polar vortex, the TV meteorologists will say, oh, look, it's colder today in Dallas or Atlanta than it is in Anchorage, Alaska. Right? Because, the air masses are like topsy-turvy. They're being moved away from their normal locations.
Right. Well,
but
sounds like it's making it too hot for the polar bears and too cold for us. Maybe would be a way to describe it. So when you get a disruptive polar vortex, it cools down over the mid latitudes, but it gets warmer over the Arctic. So it's a two-sided coin. It's not it's not this one. You're looking at an aggregate across the whole hemisphere. Right.
It might be mostly a kind of zero-sum game. But
okay. So what got you into this field?
Yeah. So for me, it started with I love snow. I love snowstorms. I was really intrigued by how a snowstorm can occur, and I got to really try to predict when the next snowstorm is coming. And so that interest, I looked at other weather phenomena as well. I just got really interested. I just wanted to understand the mechanisms and kind of the different weather phenomena. And that's how it started. And by the time I applied to college, I already knew that I want to try to get a PhD in atmospheric sciences and have a kind of a career where it was mostly focused on researching, and I will always make a contribution to better forecasting. So I don't look at the short range. So I'm not trying to improve, your weather forecast 2 or 3 days, but I started out with seasonal time scale. So what's the winter going to be like? What's the summer going to be like? But more recently, I've also looked at a shorter time scale called the sub-seasonal, and that's so the seasonal is like 90 days or so, right, or 12 weeks, 12, 13 weeks. Now the sub-seasonal is more in that week 3, week 4, so like days 15, the days 42, something like that. Mm-hmm. In the future, and that actually is sometimes called like the desert of forecasting, weather forecasting, or another way, it's like kind of the holy grail of forecasting. That's the area that we have the least amount of success in, and so that's something more recently I've been dabbling in. But so again, I'm trying to understand the dynamics or mechanics of the atmosphere on these longer time scales, not on weather time scales. So weather is like next 1 day to 1 to 7 days, but really 2 weeks to 12, 13 weeks. That's really been my focus throughout my career.
Okay, well, good luck with that. And
thank you. It's challenging, but gratifying when you can
make some progress.
Making progress, making contribution. Yes.
Good. Then just one last quick kind of personal question. Do your credentials hold up at the family reunions and the holidays, or do you have that like that one uncle that just says, "Oh, PhD"? Oh.
Well, first, everybody remembers the time when they asked me, "Is it going to rain?" And I said no, and then they went out and got caught in the rain. A thunderstorm popped up, and they got drenched. And they'll remind me every time we get together. So certainly, and I always get the line, if I was right as often as you are, there's no way I can get paid, and things like that.
I see.
But I guess it comes with the territory. But
so sub-teasing, but deep down they respect your opinion there. All right.
Yeah, it's something again. For a lot of people, their experience with meteorologists through the TV meteorologists, and not to cast aspersions on TV meteorologists, but they kind of think of, it depends on the market, but some of them have more personality, more about personality than their, ability to make a forecast, and so I think that kind of colors people's perception, even of the scientists, meteorologists.
Right. Well, thanks so much for speaking with us. And your personality was just fine for this interview, so I really appreciate it. All right, and appreciate you folks listening. That was Dr. Judah Cohen of MIT, and our guest, Pat Marida, who's going to be talking to us in just a minute, has already called in, so this show's rolling along like a utility scale wind turbine in a 20-mile-per-hour breeze. It's like amazing.
He thought of that himself.
Well, I had help. So, but now
some brainstorming.
Yeah, we did some brainstorming to come up with that. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy hearing about our sponsors. For Green Futures, brought to you by the Wood County Park District. Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And there's several ways you can get a hold of them. One is to go to their website, which is wcparks.org. Pretty simple and easy to remember. You can also call them anytime, 419-353-1897. Well, I say anytime, but you'd have to leave a message on the weekends. They get regular business hours. They have an app. You can go to any app store and search for WC Parks, and they're on all the social media, Instagram, Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. That's the Wood County Park District. And our show is also brought to you by our amazing, wonderful patrons. These are fantastic people who went to patreon.com, that's Patreon, searched for a Green Future, and signed up so that every month a little bit comes out of their checking account, comes over to us, and that's how we can keep this show going. So we really appreciate it. And another thing we appreciate are our guests, our people who call in. And so, Josh, I think we're ready to talk to Pat Marida. Pat, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me, Joe?
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
Great. Well, thank you for having me call in. And I'm a person, I've been volunteering, working on nuclear issues for a lot of years. But now I'm with a new organization. It's been around a little over a year, and we call ourselves the Ohio Nuclear Free Network.
Right.
And we speak out in opposition to both nuclear power and nuclear weapons. And part of our mission is to help people understand the intimate connection between those two, that the power serves as a front for the weapons, and it gives the industry a kind of public need or public legitimacy. And
there's something that's just come up, right? That's actually it's a revisiting of something that we thought had been dropped, right? A new law that actually we've talked about the previous version of this law in some of our older shows. So why don't you tell us about what's happening at the state legislature?
Yeah. So I greatly appreciate you having me on the show to talk about this Ohio House Bill 434. And numbers just make your mind spin sometimes, but this is 434. This bill would create a new agency called the Ohio Nuclear Development Authority. And the bill is written in a way that would make this new authority responsible to no one. And they could sell bonds and receive taxpayer money all without public oversight. It opens the door for this Nuclear Development Authority to take radioactive waste, actually, from Ohio's 2 nuclear power plants. You're familiar with Davis-Besse and Perry up there on Lake Erie. I think most of your listeners are familiar with those 2 plants. But giving this state this kind of authority over nuclear materials is unprecedented. And this authority could ship radioactive materials all around Ohio. There's nothing spelled out regarding safety or public health or public accountability for radioactive spills, leaks, or accidents. That bill doesn't mention who's responsible for cleaning up any messes, which clearly would fall to the public purse. So the bill also, 434, insulates the state and any private entities that will be doing the work under the agency. It insulates them from lawsuits, but that leaves anyone that might be injured or have property damage, it leaves those folks completely out in the cold.
And everything to do with nuclear power ends up with people getting exposed to radiation or with pollution or with contamination. So essentially, House Bill 434, as I understand it, turns Ohio into a nuclear waste dump.
Well, it certainly makes all of those activities outside of the public view. So there isn't any good way to, for the public to know what's going on. And as you said, all through the industry, there's radioactive waste is leaked or is spilled, and it just can't be done without spreading some around. But that isn't even the lack of accountability is not all about what's bizarre about this bill. It's been written by and for a single entity, and that's one very small company called E-Generation from Cleveland. And as you mentioned, Joe, this is the third legislature into which a similar bill has been introduced. And the 2 previous bills had language straight from the E-Generation website. And this bill, now 434, that opens a Pandora's box, it's only 14 pages long, and most of that language is taken up. It's outlining a complicated method of putting members onto the board of the new authority. And that complicated method would keep the public out of the mix, see that there's no real members of the public on the board of this authority. And it makes people associated with E-generation the likely people that would be on the board.
So it pretty much describes E-generation employees in terms of requirements for being on the board. Like, you've got to have this much experience in this industry and that much experience in that industry. And those, if you look at those descriptions, they actually match up with specific people at E-generation.
Yes, and they also are looking for people from the Ohio State University's Nuclear Engineering External Advisory Board. And actually, one of the people that testified in favor of this bill was a person from that very board.
Who would just, quote-unquote, coincidentally be eligible to participate on
yes,
the advisory.
Yes, he would be eligible to be on the board, according to the way this is written.
So, you mentioned that this is an organization that would be empowered to take nuclear waste and stick it wherever they want to in Ohio. So do we have, let's say on that board, do we have, let's say, geologists or maybe even ecologists that would understand the ramifications of this radioactive waste getting out into the environment?
Well, that, of course, one never knows what the knowledge of a person on that board would be, but they certainly would be interested. It's a profit-making enterprise, and Wall Street won't fund it. That's the real key, is that they have to go to the public because nuclear is really an outdated technology. Young people don't want to study it. It's a dinosaur from the past. They understand the dangers of it. The fact that they would be able to take radioactive waste, well, that is unprecedented. And that would, of course, have to be, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission would have to make some, allow that. So as of now, they can't do that, but that's one of the things that they would like to do.
Well, I think one of the best ways to lose money on an investment in the last 20 years would be to invest in nuclear power. I mean, General Electric went bankrupt because they were trying to make nuclear power work, and it destroyed their whole huge company. So, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time this week, Pat. We'll have to have you back on in the future. We can talk in more detail, but just let us know, where is this right now in the process of becoming law?
It is being heard by the Ohio House Energy and Natural Resources Committee. And if people want to, are interested in stopping this bill, the thing to do right now is call the office of Ohio Representative Jason Stevens. Jason Stevens, he is the chair of this committee, the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. The number is 614-466-1366. And that's, again, 614-466-1366. Tell them you're opposed to the bill. And there's actually a lot of information at the Ohio Legislature's website. Just go to legislature.ohio.gov. You can look up 434. You can look up who your own representative is. Put in your address. You'll find out your representative and your senator. And you can give them a call or contact them however it tells you on their website.
All right. Well, let's pray that we can kill this thing in committee once again, Pat. So thanks so much for updating us.
And thank you very much for having me on, Joe.
You're welcome. Okay, that was Pat Marida, and we're always glad to hear from her. And now it's time to hear from Rebecca on a lighter note.
Yes. This week's short segment was inspired actually by the 1980s home decor craze that I more or less think of the country kitchens look, which involved some checks and a lot of farm animals, baited farm animals, and also ducks. There were a lot of things with ducks on them, like little shelves, key holders, and I remember from that time that the ducks were always facing each other so that their necks and heads formed a heart shape. And I just thought that was, some kitschy thing somebody came up with. But then one day I was walking in downtown Toledo, either in, I think, Swan Creek or Promenade Park there, where there's a sort of little backwater created by the sort of floating dock they put up every year, that creates some calm water where ducks like to hang out. And saw some ducks actually doing that. I think as part of the courtship process. They were just sort of arranged facing each other, staring deeply, and I swear soulfully, into each other's eyes.
Ducks have pretty big eyes for their, size. So, yeah, that's
I guess
pretty romantic to be talking about.
That was a thing which ducks are more romantic than you think.
Cool.
So, ducks are basically the family Anatidae, which maybe I'm saying correctly. There's also swans and geese in there. They have longer necks. Although ducks actually have fairly long necks in terms of birds, not, flamingo long, but longer than average. They form a taxon, the ducks, within the thing. But they're not a monophyletic group, which means they're not all the same direct lineage. They're all in the same family, but some of them are not, there's sort of aunts and uncles and cousins, and they don't all come from one sort of proto-duck type animal.
Okay.
Yeah, there are both fresh and saltwater ducks. They get confused a lot with loons, divers, gallinules, grebes, and coots. And also, from Toledo, maybe mud hens. Whatever those are. I think they're grebes or something. I don't know. But yeah, these are things which sort of look like a duck. I don't think they quack like a duck, though. Their name means diver in most European languages. They're sort of they're named after what we call dabbling ducks, which I thought was just a phrase that, meant you were reading A.A. Milne. But no, that's sort of a quasi-scientific designation. Those are the ducks which feed by kind of upending themselves. They'll be there floating vertically, horizontally on top of the water, and then to feed, they'll just stick their whole body underwater with just their tail sticking up. Kind of do a little, almost like a handstand or something. So there's also something called diving ducks, which they're a tribe. They're different. Male ducks are called drakes, and then female ducks are called duck or hen. There's also a sea duck tribe and a stiff-tailed duck tribe. So those are sort of apart from dabbling ducks, apparently.
Those are the more serious ducks, then?
Serious.
As opposed to dabbling ducks?
Yeah,
okay,
they're super into being ducks. I don't know. But yeah, there's sexual dimorphism in ducks, mostly in the northern variety, and a lot of it is just during the winter, and in the summer, the male ducks molt to look sort of more like female ducks, and they're also some ducks are flightless, like one or two are just really completely flightless. A lot of them are sort of seasonally flightless when they're molting, which happens right before their migration, when they're getting ready to go someplace. So, you get some fresh feathers for the trip, apparently. New outfit, new little traveling outfit. Their bills are generally have serrated pecten, which is especially pronounced in filter feeders. So, I guess some of them are not filter feeders, and some are. Yep. So, yeah, interestingly, I lost my fourth thing, but for my big finish is the information that some ducks have developed corkscrew-shaped vaginas to prevent rape.
Oh,
I'm not sure how that works when they find their special someone. Does it straighten out? I don't know. I'm kind of worried. But yeah, it doesn't sound like a very romantic thing, but if you think about it, with your higher animals, sure, sexual assault's about power and control, and yes, you require consent even with people who are not monogamous, but with maybe even some of the higher animals, not just people, but with an animal on the level of duck, you really the concept of rape sort of implies the existence of romance and preferences, at least strong preferences for a particular other duck. Because otherwise, it's not so much rape as just, not my turn, we got to go back of the line,
Okay.
So,
well, Rebecca, I'm not sure.
Joe's going to make me shut up now.
Ever wanted?
I don't blame him.
I'm not sure I ever wanted to know that, but I am sure I'm never going to be able to forget
it.
So.
Too. I just thought I'd spread the trauma out to more people.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your report, Rebecca.
Thank you.
All right, so now on to ecological news. And as I said, we've got some really good news we're going to end up with, but we got a fair number of stories we've got to get through to get there. One of them is something that should be of interest to people who live in Toledo, since our city was once again almost faced nuclear disaster from a nuclear plant in Michigan. Back on February 4th, the Enrico Fermi II nuclear power plant had another near meltdown kind of accident. The plant, we've been talking about it for a while because since mid-December, it's been running at 58% power, which makes no sense because there was a planned refueling in February, but you do not shut your nuke plant to have power 2 months out from a shutdown. You don't need to start cooling down that far out. So we knew something was amiss, and they wouldn't talk to us. I mean, I actually tried calling the press office, and they actually called me back and took some information from me. Then they completely ignored me after that. So we have no idea what was going on, except there's some intriguing clues in the NRC accident report from this event that happened on February 4th. What happened is the water level started dropping over the nuclear fuel rods. And if you know about nuclear plants, you know that all that has to happen is the water level has to drop below the top of the rods, and boom, you've got fire, meltdown, nuclear disaster. So we were on our way to that. And the plant itself shut itself down with a scram, which is when all the control rods, the neutron absorber rods, jam themselves into the core and absorb all the neutrons so that the nuclear reaction stopped. So the plant said, oh my God, I've got to shut down, and the computers tripped the thing. And so what the humans in the control room were in the process of doing when this happened was, for some reason, they were removing the south reactor feed water pump. So like there's at least 2 pumps that feed water to keep the rods covered in water, the south and the north. And for some reason, while the plant was running, before they shut it down for the refueling, they decided to disconnect and remove the south one. And so what that did, as the south one was reducing in speed, the north pump was like, we're reducing in speed, I've got to speed up. And so the north pump started trying to pump faster because the south pump was shutting down. And it started pumping so fast that it actually tripped, and that is, it wasn't able to keep the suction up because it was trying to pump too fast because the water level was dropping. And so once it went offline, the plant was on its way to a meltdown. The water level started dropping, temperature started going up, and that's when the plant itself said, oh my God, and tripped itself with a scram. Now, in the report to the NRC, they called this a 4-hour non-emergency, but we know that for the nuclear industry, anything that isn't a full-blown meltdown with an explosion is considered a non-emergency. But for those of us lay people, we could call it an emergency. So just a heads up that we had a near miss, and that every nuclear power plant in the country is, just 1 or 2 accidents away from similar near misses. Next story. I attended one of the Yellowstone. We had Stephanie C. on last week talking about the fact that Yellowstone is considering revising its bison management scheme in order to allow more bison to survive every winter. I attended that meeting, and it was a 2-hour meeting with Q&A from the general audience. Apparently about 200 people attended these meetings, which weren't very well publicized. They were very poorly publicized. And they didn't answer any of my smart alecky questions, unfortunately, but they answered a fair number of them, and I learned some interesting things. One is that every year, 8 to 10% of the bison in the park die of natural causes, old age or disease or wolf. And so their scheme to take out about 30 to 40% of the herd every year through hunting and through hazing and through trapping has to be added to that. So now we're talking, maybe almost up to 50% of the herd every year dying. So they're considering allowing more bison to survive. They've also come up with a magic number. They say 3,000 bison is enough to maintain the genetic health of the herd. But if you're an ecologist, you know that every population is subject to occasional disasters. Like you'll have one winter where the bison just can't get to the food, and you might lose maybe half your herd there. So keeping it at 3,000 is a recipe for disaster, because disasters will happen, and you'll wipe out your genetic diversity in 1 year. So they're considering going up to as many as 10,000 bison, which is good news. And comments are still open until February 28th. And I encourage everybody to take a look at that. All right, and we're zipping ahead now because it's already 10:54, and I had promised we're going to end on good news, and here it is. In fact, this news is so good you might have heard this on the mainstream media, but a federal court has reversed the delisting of the gray wolf as an endangered species in most of the United States of America. So, in other words, wolves are back on the endangered species list in most of the country. They were actually put on the endangered species list back in the 70s, but the Fish and Wildlife Service, even though they're required to by law, never really came up with a plan for bringing them back from endangered status. They just sort of let things happen. And so in a few places, the wolves managed to get their numbers back up again. And so the Trump administration used that as a excuse to delist them back in the last few years. So Trump did that, he delisted them, and there was immediate slaughter all over the West. People started killing wolves like crazy as soon as they came off the endangered species list. A lot of environmental groups sued to put them back on. The Biden administration, though, sadly defended the delisting. They were like, Trump got that right. And unfortunately for Biden, the federal judge agreed with the environmental organizations and has said to the Fish and Wildlife Service, they're endangered. States are screwing it up because they're letting people slaughter them left and right. So you need to put them back on the endangered species list. And just an interesting note, back during the Trump administration when they took them off in 2020, 1.8 million people wrote in opposed to the delisting, and those ranged from everyday people to Jane Goodall to scientists to people who ran wildlife tours. 1.8 million people said it's a bad idea, but Trump went ahead and did it anyway, and then Biden defended it. But now so this delists wolves in 44 states. Unfortunately, it does not protect the wolves in Montana, Idaho, parts of Washington, Oregon, and Utah, and Alaska. And that's because those states, the wolf was removed from the Endangered Species Act by a separate act of Congress in the Kill All Wolves bill. No, that's not the actual official title.
But it should be.
But it's a more accurate title. So this doesn't protect them there, but it protects them everywhere else in the United States, and it really gives the wolves a chance to come back and to actually make it and put themselves back into our ecosystems. And as an ecologist, we ecologists know that having wolves benefits everybody and everything in countless ways. And just one of the more interesting ways is they've studied Yellowstone, and they found that once they reintroduced wolves, it reduced the amount of erosion. And so the loss of topsoil got stopped because the wolves started eating and chasing off the critters that would eat all the vegetation along the riverbanks that protected the river from eroding. So just so many benefits to having wolves, and they're just such an essential part of our ecosystems. And so thank you, Federal District Court, for telling the Biden administration and the Trump administration you got it wrong, and 1.8 million people got it right. So all right, so that was the good upbeat news. We got less than a minute left. I just want to remind people, March 11th is the Unplugged Nuclear Power event, so start planning now to try try to take your house as much off the grid as possible. And we'll talk more about that in next week's show.
You're here.
All right. Thanks so much for listening. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off.
I don't want them nukes.